Hey everyone, I am back with another lore dive and theory video today. And I have to say, we're definitely getting lost in the sauce on this one. Developed and published by Sad Square Studio, VISAGE is a straight up horror game. And I've never been so terrified while playing a game before. It definitely has some Silent Hill or PT vibes to it, but it is a game unto itself. It has an excellent story that had me curious enough to follow it through to the end, twice. We play as Dwayne Anderson, a man stuck in this very haunted house of loss and death. Your goal is to bear witness to the events that happen in this house to 3 people in particular, and discover just what kind of person Dwayne was. All the while, your sanity and life will be in danger from the seemingly benign things like doors slamming and lights flicking off, to the much more harmful previous residents attacking you. This isn't an action game. There is no fighting back. If they catch you, that's game over, son. It can be nerve-wracking and anxiety-inducing, but the stories were interesting enough to push me forward to find out just what the hell is going on with this house, and what's up with Dwayne. So I've scoured all my recordings of this game and did some research, and well, I found some interesting things. Now, I can't say if this has all been said before, but take a ride with me and I might have something new for you. As usual, I will go over each chapter, have some notes at the end, and then have the theories after I've presented everything. Welcome to the most terrifying chapter, in my opinion. In this one, we're gonna get some information on the first resident in the timeline. From the get-go, the creep factor is already there. The closet door will creak open and we'll see a drawing of her and a dark figure. Mimicking the drawing, we knock on the wall, and we get a knock back. After doing it a second time, the lights flicker. Heading out of the room and looking to the left in the direction of the parents' bedroom, we find a stuffed animal with a dark handprint on it and a drawing of a bear behind it. Making our way downstairs, we'll notice the TV is on. It's playing a home movie of Dwayne and Claire's wedding. Eventually, it'll switch to showing a view of the counter in the basement play area. Lucy will be standing in the freezer room doorway, menacingly, and we'll see an eye drawn on the counter. Once in that room, we'll hear wheezing, and going against every instinct not to go in there, we do anyway. To some relief, she isn't in there, but that relief doesn't last long, as now there will be a camera on the countertop with its flash constantly going off. Ah, the horror game camera mechanic, a tried and true trope. One I'm not particularly fond of, if I'm being honest. Luckily, the use of this to see where we're going is only used minimally. Its main use will be revealing drawings on the walls and floors. There's also one more use for this camera, but you'll only really get a lot of use out of that if you do this chapter slowly. Lucy will be standing in a barely lit hallway. The first flash of the camera reveals the dark figure standing behind her, which I'll be referring to as the demon from now on. She'll begin walking towards you and will drop something on the floor. Once the area is clear, we can check out what she dropped. It's a syringe for the administration of some kind of sedative. Using the flash of the camera reveals a trail to follow. It leads us back up to Lucy/Sarah's room. She'll appear standing in front of a chalkboard that reads, "Darkness haunts you." Approaching the chalkboard, we turn around and see Lucy again. Watching long enough, and we'll see the demon appear behind her and pull her into the closet. Now that the doors are open, we can follow the odd demonic sound. Luckily, it isn't far, as it's in the office next door. Using the camera here, we'll see a large drawing taking up most of the wall. Approaching it will cause the door to open, and after leaving, we'll see a glowing red light at the bottom of the stairs. That door leads to a rainy wooded area with a signpost labeled Guilt, pointing down the trail. Along the path are multiple stuffed animals, which leads us to a treehouse nestled in the branches of a large tree. Inside, there are a number of drawings. It's a timeline of Lucy's story with the demon. It looks like this demon friend thing began talking to her through the TV and the radio, and then possessed her and made her harm the bird. On one of the drawings, there is a key taped to the back. This unlocks the box, which has a drawing of Lucy being injected with something, and she looks rather distressed. Now a voice begins to speak on the radio.
I'm with you, Lucy. Stay with me, Lucy. It's bad, Lucy. It has to go away. Don't tell anyone, Lucy. Me and you. I want to help you. It's not what it seems, Lucy. Your parents wouldn't understand, Lucy. Only you can understand. Get rid of it, Lucy. Do it, Lucy. Do it. Get rid of it, Lucy.
As the radio repeats those phrases, you'll hear Lucy crying, and when approaching the windows and doorway, they're quickly boarded up. The atmosphere becomes more ominous, with a glow from the radio illuminating the dark with red. Eventually, the floor breaks, and we fall through to the basement play area. We'll see a box of switch plates spilling out on the floor. You know what this means, right? Yes, we're now stuck in darkness, no longer able to turn any of the lights on in the house. We'll be relying on whatever ambient light there is, our lighter, and our camera. Luckily, the switch plates form a trail to follow, which leads us back to Lucy's room. However, we can't enter through her door, so we'll have to go through the parents' bedroom. We also may be being chased here, but I was too freaked out to look back and check. Once inside, we'll find a drawing of the demon behind a red door. Tearing past it reveals another room with a bird cage. Past that is a dark storage room full of bird cages. We can hear Lucy wheezing nearby, and using whatever light we have, we approach, and she disappears. But that doesn't mean she's gone. We'll have to go through multiple drawers in this area to find a key, and make our way to the other end of the room to unlock the door. Lucy will also be in here, wandering around, so we're gonna have to keep an ear out to avoid her in this area. The next room is a hallway lined with even more bird cages. At some point again, it sounds like Lucy's chasing us. And again, I do not look back.
She's gonna get me!
In this room, there is yet again a bird cage, but this time it isn't empty. There's a wooden bird and a radio inside, and it seems to be leaking a black watery substance. I tried listening to the voice on the radio, but I couldn't pick anything out of it. It's too layered and distorted for me to make sense of. Approaching the bird cage causes the doors to disappear. After we circle around it a bit, the wooden bird will disappear and Lucy will be in the far corner. You can hear a bird's tweets and some kind of crunching sound. Poor Pico. Finally, a door appears and we can move into the next room. In here, we can see a camera drawing on the wall, some eyes, and a demon with X's for eyes, as well as photos underneath. This is a clue on how to deal with the demon. You use your flash when it's too close for comfort, and it'll send it away for some time. Which means yes, we will be dealing with the demon soon. Below it is a little recreation of an area in the basement. This is another clue for somewhere you'll need to go in the very, very near future. There's one more room connected to this area. It's completely dark and empty except for a single wardrobe in the middle. Opening the wardrobe gives us a jump scare in the form of the demon. Luckily, Dwayne paid attention to the previous room and flashes the thing with the camera. It'll disappear, but Lucy will be behind us and will be shoved out with the door slamming behind us. In the bathroom, we find a mannequin jaw. I think we know what to do with this. Grab it and don't walk, but run your ass down to the basement where the rest of the mannequin is located. If you go too slow here, you will get a visit from the demon. You can protect yourself with the camera if you hear it approaching, but if you somehow don't manage to flash it, you're gonna get got by Mr. Needlefingers. Placing the jaw on the mannequin will open the wardrobe. We can see an eye drawn on the back of it, signaling that we need to use the flash of our camera. Doing so multiple times will have the demon reaching out and pulling us in. Now we're gonna have to quickly make our way through this maze of hallways and rooms. If you're quick enough, you may get lucky and not have the demon appear at all. But this is not 100% guaranteed. And if it is a first run through and you're going in blind, it's easy to make a wrong turn and make this run much more frustrating and terrifying to deal with. Because if you get got at any time in this section, you have to start back from the beginning. Seeing as how I'm a little baby poo-poo pants, I went through this area as quickly as I could by memory. So if there's anything lore related hidden around, I didn't see it. When you make it back into the house proper, you can follow the scratches on the wall back up to the bathroom. We'll be locked in at this point, so we begin examining everything in here. I don't know if it's a time thing or something you examine, but eventually the bathtub will begin to fill with water. This sequence takes some time, so I kept myself busy looking around. If you check the window, we'll see our friend vibrating outside. Once the tub is full and turns off, we can get inside. Lucy surfaces on the other end, croaks at us grudge style, and then we're underwater. We'll see various scenes play out, Lucy watching TV, engrossed to the point she ignores or doesn't hear her mother calling for her.
Lucy! Supper's ready, come on up!
The next one shows the parents talking about the Pico incident.
Why would she do that? She loved Pico!
We learn that this is extremely out of the ordinary for Lucy, so much that they're considering getting professional help.
I think we should see a professional.
Now the parents are talking about the diagnostic, and things seem grim for Lucy.
You heard the diagnostic. She could be in danger. We don't have much of a choice.
Her mother is disturbed that they prescribe syringes for a child and wonders why they just can't give her pills.
But who the hell prescribes syringes for a child? Couldn't they just give us pills like everyone else?
From her point of view, the doctors don't seem to be as compassionate as they probably should be.
This new doctor clearly doesn't know anything about parenting.
The last scene has the mother saying she doesn't want the doctor's help anymore because it seems Lucy has only been getting worse since they went to them.
I don't want their help anymore. She's only been worsening ever since we went to these doctors. Imaginary friends and all these weird behaviors. She doesn't even call me Mom anymore!
And after that scene, there's now a bathtub full of blood. Still, we get in it, and like before, we go under and then emerge in the bathroom. Flopping out of the tub like a giant flounder, we get a view of Lucy. She locked herself in the bathroom, and her parents try to get her to come out, or at least get in themselves. We get a view of the red ceiling before witnessing the demon appear. And even more disturbing, Lucy rips her jaw off and falls to the ground. And that is the end of Lucy's chapter. A truly gruesome end. So when I first played, I had assumed that Lucy had killed Pico the bird after she had been given the medication due to the placement of the key to the box with the needle picture in it being behind one of the other pictures. So I thought like it was a missing piece. But after the last scenes, it seems Lucy had done this before going to the doctors and being prescribed syringes.
Even before we sought their help, she had problems. She killed Pico for fuck's sake.
So she was suffering from something beforehand. Something that made her hallucinate voices and made her do things she didn't want to do. And after the syringes, it got worse. So yes, Lucy was very sick. But whatever she was prescribed made her worse. What we want to keep in mind from this chapter is the voices coming from the radio and TV, the syringes, and Lucy's mental illness. Dolores' chapter is more slow-paced and creepy as opposed to the terrifying gauntlet of Lucy's. I gotta say, I think this was my favorite chapter. I like puzzle solving and having the time to take in the surroundings. So getting into it, after picking up the mirror key and unlocking the corresponding door, we'll be in the room with a sheet-covered mirror. Uncovering it will reveal the mirror, and when we turn around, it'll be gone. It seems to have grown legs and moved into the TV room. Only when you remove the sheet there, there's nothing. And we'll be prompted to look up to the balcony above. Heading upstairs, we'll see the light flickering next to the son's room and we'll find the mirror on the balcony. Shown in the mirror is a rocking chair in front of a window. This doesn't look familiar to us at this point, but we're gonna quickly find out it's in the attic. Moving away from the mirror, we'll hear footsteps above us and see the attic entrance. We'll need a hook to pull the stairs down, but for now, we follow the sound of the footsteps into the parents' bedroom. Looking up, we can see a crack in the ceiling, and soon the footsteps will reach that area and we'll hear the creaking of a rocking chair. Leaving the room and looking down the stairs, we'll see a figure standing there before disappearing. It will reappear at the end of the hallway and walk off. This is our cue to follow. Eventually, we'll end up in the progress room and find a painting on the wall of a man and a woman. Only, the man has an attic hook stuck through his eye. We'll need to remove this in order to enter the attic. With hook in hand, we return to the second floor and pull the stairs down. We can hear the creaking in the rocking chair even more now and located on the far side. Interacting with it stops its rocking and causes the panel next to it to fall down, making me shit my pants. Jumping through this new exit, we're in the parents' room, only now it looks different. It looks how it did back when this belonged to Dolores and her husband George. In this room, we'll find a baby monitor base, a crib, multiple paintings of the same thing on the wall, a bunch of numbers scribbled on paper and part of the wall and floor, a mirror, a locked box, and some clothing on the bed. Behind one of the paintings is a peephole into the small room. Inside is a clue for a future puzzle. There's also a cassette tape and its player. The cassette here is labeled Dolores Schizophrenia Disease, and listening to it paints a pretty sad picture. Picking up the slipper from the floor and placing it on the bed will cause the mirror to crack. When we leave the room, we'll see what looks like a bloody umbilical cord on the floor, which will be pulled out of view. Dolores will be standing there in the dark, and her laughter sounds like it's coming from a radio or a baby monitor. Again, doing the exact opposite of what my instincts scream at me to do, we approach her. She'll disappear, though her laughter only gets louder as you turn around and run towards the bedroom. The door will slam shut before you can enter, and the screen goes black. Things return relatively back to normal. We now see blood at the top of the stairs and a trail leading down. Following it will lead us to the umbilical cord thing again, and we'll use it to climb down the open grate on the floor. As we continue on, we'll see the tar man walk by. We don't have to worry about him though, as we're gonna go the opposite way to the right. We'll find ourselves in a dark room with mirrors standing in a circle. As we circle the mirrors, we'll sometimes see Dolores either just standing there, walking past, or hanging around. Sorry, I'll see myself out. Finally, there will be one mirror left with her reflection. If we look away and back again, we'll be jump scared and the mirror will fall down, revealing a hole in the floor. This leads to another confessional area. Interacting with it will have Dolores telling us to
Bring me my child.
Leaving her be for now and exiting the mirror on the wall, we hear a car alarm blaring. Heading into the garage, we find a sledgehammer impaled through the windshield from the inside. After retrieving the hammer in a, in my opinion, oddly sexual way. I mean, it's not just me, right? We now have a new tool, greatly useful for proceeding through this chapter. After being ding-dong ditched by Dolores, we'll proceed to smashing some mirrors and solving some puzzles. What's behind these mirrors offers us some insight into Dolores' time in the house and into her own mind. There's a lot of symbolism and metaphors here. So let's listen to the cassette tapes we can find for some context from George's point of view first.
I fear that Dolores is getting worse by the day. Her temperaments are extremely bipolar. She gets easily upset over small things, almost always immediately followed by self-resentment and the asking for forgiveness. It's getting harder to cope with her outbursts, but my love for her is strong still, and I'll do whatever it takes to help her overcome her condition. Oh no. I'm gonna be late for tea. Where did I put that damned attic hook?
The context here is that she gets easily upset, which just as quickly turns to self-resentment.
Dolores now has moments of severe psychosis. She loses contact with reality for long periods of time. She hardly remembers me anymore. She's lost her trust in me, and it's becoming harder and harder to administer her treatments. She sometimes forgets where she is, or even the fact that she has to wear clothes. She keeps on scratching her nails or banging her head on doors. She murmurs gibberish sentences and roams aimlessly around the house. The other day, she even accused me of trying to poison her. I'm on the edge. I don't think I can take much more of this. How am I supposed to work, take care of the baby, and deal with her dementia all at the same time?
George gives her treatments, which means it's probably not pills. She's also becoming distrustful of him and thinks he's trying to harm her.
I now fear for the baby. She has become obsessed with him. She says she can always hear him cry over the baby monitor, even when it's off. She has trouble differentiating him from the dolls in the house. Once she threw a doll away, realizing it wasn't the baby. I am horrified at the idea that she might do the same to the baby, thinking she's holding a doll. I've got rid of all the dolls in the house, and now she keeps on calling him, never remembering where he is. I have to keep a constant eye on both of them. The only time I can get some work done is when she's sedated. It feels like a nightmare.
She's become obsessed with her child. She's having auditory hallucinations, and her treatments involve sedatives.
Dolores' symptoms are aggravating. Doctors tell me it's become very hard to pinpoint the exact disorder. They tell me she's got symptoms of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, psychosis, dementia, and more. I don't know what to do anymore. It feels like the treatments are only making things worse. Today she told me she often hears her own voice whispering a sequence of 5 numbers through the baby monitor. She said it's the key to her inner house. What does that even mean? What am I supposed to do?
Dolores has many symptoms of many different mental disorders, and George believes the treatments are only making it worse. She hears her own voice whispering a sequence of 5 numbers through the baby monitor, and that it's the key to her inner house. So after hearing that, let's take a look at some of the instances of the observations as we get a peek behind those mirrors. In the mirror on the balcony near Michael's bedroom, it holds a room with hanging wrapped bodies with ink blots used like in a Rorschach test. Well, some of them anyway. There's a hint of which pictures we should be focusing on: a moon, an eye, and a shadow. The hint itself is interesting if you want to try to apply some meaning to it. I can't say for certain that there is any meaning to it, but let's overanalyze it anyway. Whirling in an everlasting dream, a 2-sided moon with clouded vision lies down innocently by its guilty shadow. 3 things underlined: 2-sided moon, clouded vision, guilty shadow. We could link this to each of the previous residents. 2-sided moon could mean Dolores and her bipolar disease. Clouded vision could be referring to Rakan. I haven't gone over him yet, but he does suffer from scopophobia, and eyes feature prominently in his chapter. Guilty shadow could be referring to Lucy, or really her demon. Anyway, moving on. Once you've solved this puzzle, you'll have the crank, which we'll need for the next one. In a basement closet area mirror, we see lots of crosses and Jesus Christ. This room is obviously concerning a religious connection, but for now we take the knife and move on to the next mirror. This mirror is located in the office upstairs. In here we see George's body slumped back in the chair with 6 knives and 7 stab wounds. With the knife we got from the previous room, we place it gently into the open stab wound in his heart. This has him releasing the key with the message, "I love you," attached to it. And we can also pick up an IV bag from him. With this key, we open the box in the room behind the wall and get the Cloud toy and Dolores' tape behavior development number 1. There's also a deep freezer full of IV bags and black ooze with flies buzzing around. Now, when we try to leave, George is gonna be on his feet, and proceeding into the room causes him to walk towards you. Trust me, this time he ain't being so friendly, so now's a good time to back your ass into that room and shut the door before he can reach you. After a moment, he'll be gone, and it's safe to come out. So let's analyze this a little bit further. He had 7 stab wounds. We got the 7th knife from Jesus on the cross in the previous mirror room. We could say this symbolizes the 7 days of creation, with 7 itself meaning complete. The wound in his heart, the key says "I love you," the tape has George saying it's getting harder to cope with her outbursts, but my love for her is strong still. I mean, there you go. It's all about love. The IV bags in the freezer with goo and flies, well, this has a little more meaning later on in the video, but you know, keep in mind. The mirror in the living room is our next destination. Inside, we'll see paintings on the wall and floor. We need to put the correct 3 paintings on the wall. This is where that clue from the bedroom peephole comes into play. After placing the correct paintings, the wall opens up to see a hospital bed, with the shadow of Dolores' figure lying on it, and next to it's an IV stand. Placing the IV bag on the stand causes the shadow to disappear and leave behind a sun toy. There's nothing really major here that I could discern other than that this is probably what George was referring to when he said treatments. It seems it's given to her via IV, and what I saw in the IV bag was 1.5% glycine. What I did manage to find out about glycine is that it may benefit certain psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia, but the evidence is limited and more research is needed. The mirror in the progress room has a fetus connected to an umbilical cord. For now, we retrieve the glass ball and head to the garage. By the way, you see this too, right? Okay. Yeah, that's probably symbolism, but let's move past. Using the vise, we break the ball open and get a piece of paper with a clue to another mirror room. This room is through the mirror in the area where all the bookcases are. After fiddling with the clocks, the plates, and the windows, we'll hear a baby crying. And after going around the center walls, an opening will appear to show a crib full of baby monitors. Here's that mention of Dolores being able to hear the baby crying through the monitor, even when it's off. In any case, we'll need this for yet another room. Before we head into the next room, we need to head to the bedroom and turn the baby monitor on. This will initiate Dolores speaking over the monitor. She will say a sequence of 5 numbers. Those same numbers you can find scrawled on the paper, part of the wall, and the floor in the same room. It is these same 5 numbers George mentioned in the tape. In the bathroom, we'll find the next mirror room. Listening to the sequence of numbers, we find the corresponding number on the clocks overhead and head in that direction until we find ourselves in a hallway with a door at the end. Through the door is a record player playing music and the sound of a baby crying. Overhead, a crib is held by chains. When trying to interact with the record player, you're gonna get a warning from Dolores not to touch it.
Don't touch that.
Oh, alright then. Now the home is turned into... gross. Just gross. What is this? Why is this? Anyway, following the only path we can take, we'll find the crib and the record player again. And is it just me or is this giving Silent Hill vibes? After taking the handle, the crib disintegrates. We can now follow the umbilical cord back to the previous mirror in the progress room. We'll find a baby in a crib, and after scooping the little fella up, we notice the atmosphere has changed. We finally heed Dolores' request and deliver the baby to her. And after doing so, the happy, sad, melancholic mood is broken by the figure of Jesus falling off the cross, revealing the moon toy. I think the sequence may be alluding to how she's become obsessed with the baby. I mean, this is her child, so of course she's gonna hold him in a special place. But it seems it's become unhealthy, at least according to George and the imagery of the crib and chains. Down in the basement with the mannequin and a blue tarp, that's our next mirror. In here, we'll see Dolores sitting at the kitchen table.
What took you so long, George? You know when tea time is, and yet you always find a way to be late. Were you in your study room again, scribbling nonsense and talking to your recorder? I'm beginning to think you love your work more than me. I know you tire of me. Oh, yes. I know you'd have me gone in a heartbeat if you could. It's just fine. I'm sorry. I'm just tired. Would you be a doll and fetch me some of my special tea? You know where it is. I'll wait here, George.
She'll ask us to fix her some of her special tea. Picking up the key, we can see a house drawn on it with the word tea written in the attic space. After heading all the way to the attic to grab the tea, and all the way back to Dolores, we proceed to make her tea. The things we get is a sledgehammer to the head. Talk about no good deed going unpunished, huh? Before we're hit once again, we notice the winter white Earl Grey tin now is labeled as rat poison. Dolores will stuff us into an oven and attempt to cook us. We have to bash the oven door open before we're baked like a succulent Christmas ham. Luckily, she's not around to attack us again when we manage to escape. We can now pick up the star toy and a crowbar, which we'll need for the next mirror. Again, this shows us something George mentioned. She was quick to accuse us of having ill feelings toward her, only to self-resent as she apologized immediately afterward. It also shows her trust eroding in George, and while her husband didn't die because he was cooked in an oven, it does show us that she is capable of harming and killing someone. Our next mirror is next to the last one we went through. We'll have to use the crowbar on the window in order to get the compass. Nothing too much to interpret here, at least not that I noticed. We head to the mirror located to the stairs behind the chain door next to the kitchen. In here is a playground and part of the neighborhood. With the use of the compass, we follow the needle, which leads to a graveyard where we'll find these little pink flowers. Eventually, we'll be led to a crib partially buried in the ground. Digging around in the rocks and dirt, we'll find a box that has a rocket ship toy inside. We can now exit through a set of tomb doors. Now that we have all the toys, we can return to the bedroom and place them on the mobile. After activating it, we'll gain the music box key, and in that box is a record. With a record and record player handle, we now head back to the basement. Placing the record and the handle in their respective places, we can hear music begin to play. We can now enter the last mirror, which luckily is right next to us. Inside looks like a depressing MC Escher painting. We follow the music that leads us to the correct door. All the while, we can see various scenes of Dolores through the windows in here. After walking through the hallway of cribs and organs, we'll find a door that leads to the peephole room. There are two we can peek through in here. The first one shows Dolores standing in front of the window, and the next shows her interacting with her son before walking off. Unfortunately, not too long after, we watch her hang herself from the ceiling. It's horrifying and a tragedy, and that ends Dolores' chapter, leaving reality behind. Some things to keep in mind from this chapter are Dolores suffered from seemingly many mental illnesses. She was administered treatments that George believes was making her worse, and she heard voices coming from the baby monitor. So, Rakan's chapter isn't bad, but in my opinion, it didn't have the same punch sure to scare factor as the first two, but it does offer some interesting clues as to the whole story of the game itself. We start this chapter by picking up the crutch. Now, there's a wheelchair located in the living room. Getting near it turns our screen a bit staticky and black and white, much like we're observing through a camera. After sitting and having our retinas burned out, we can see a scene of Rakan in the kitchen. Further in, we'll see another scene of him eating. He notices something wrong with the radio, and after searching it, seems to find something.
What? What the fuck is this?
The next scene's in the library room. Rakan's pulling books from the shelves, looking for and seemingly finding what we assume is some kind of recording or listening device.
You think you can get me that easily, huh?
Now, in a highly agitated state, he grabs the gun. In the next scene, he points the gun at us and warns us not to move, before shooting us. Soon, we learn it's not Dwayne he's shooting at, but something much more terrifying. The tar man makes an appearance and attacks Rakan as the man screams. He is getting his ass kicked.
Leave me alone!
Before we move on, let's look at what this segment has established. Rakan seemingly finds a listening device or camera in the radio in the bookcase. From our view, we didn't see anything, so this could have been just a delusion. Then we have the tar man. He's made appearances throughout the game so far, at least once in every chapter, and he emerges from the black spots on the walls in between chapters. It seems Rakan sees him too, even unloads his gun on him to no effect. The question is, why is Rakan seeing the tar man? Upstairs on the office door, we find an eye. Examining it will reveal a painting behind us, also with an eye. We're gonna wanna poke that little sucker out so the door opens for us, allowing us to find the next wheelchair. In this scene, we'll hear doctors talking about Rakan.
Yes, sorry, I'm with you.
I have the information you requested concerning the patient that came in tonight. He claims that someone broke into his house and tried to strangle him, and that he used his firearm in an attempt to defend himself. What's weird is that there's nothing in the police report that indicates any break-in. There are some minor bruises on his body, but they all seem self-inflicted. The police also interrogated the neighbor who called the police. She claims to have seen him tossing books from his bookshelves frantically, seemingly searching for something.
And what was he searching for?
It's hard to tell. He refuses to answer most of our questions, claiming we already know the answers. He believes we're partly responsible for what happened. It's not really surprising. I took a look at his medical background, and he's had really bad cases of
Scopophobia.
Exactly.
This gives us a little more explanation on the previous events. Rakan says someone broke in and attacked him. He doesn't mention the man looking odd, but it could be he just didn't mention it. It also could mean that it wasn't the tar man who was attacking him, that it might be something Dwayne saw overriding what was really there. However, Rakan did shoot the intruder. If said intruder was human, even with a bulletproof vest, I feel like they would in the least be stunned, especially being shot multiple times. Though, according to the police report, there were no signs of a break-in, so there was no body, no blood, nothing. And Rakan only has some minor bruising, which they attribute to being self-inflicted. We learn Rakan suffers from scopophobia. Is it possible this was some kind of delusional episode he experienced? Can we trust the police report? He also seems to believe the doctors are in on whatever he believes is going on. In any case, we also learn he's in room 323, and that gives us a lead where to start. Navigating around the hospital, we'll find a nurse's station with the key for that room. As we approach, we can hear Rakan struggling with the doctors. One of them mentions giving him a sedative, which he does not want.
Give him the sedative. No!
In this room, there's a wall with a loose brick. Interacting with it reveals another room with a key on the janitor's cart. But we're gonna have to find a tool in order to get through that. After we find a crowbar, get through the wall, and retrieve the key, Rakan is gonna chase us.
Where do you think you're going there?
We run our ass to the meeting room we just got the key for and slip inside, only for Rakan to lock us in, the bastard. We'll hear the power shut off, but luckily we'll find a flashlight along with the transit wing key. Following the exit signs, we'll find the transit wing while Rakan tells us, and on the other side of the doors, Rakan stands in the window surrounded by exit signs. Then he jumps. When we approach, Rakan isn't there. Instead, he's performed the old switcheroo and pushes Dwayne out of the window. Back in the house, we'll now see it's covered in black vines, or roots. And now we'll have to find 3 paintings with eyes to poke while Rakan chases us intermittently in order to unlock the door the next wheelchair is in. With that done, the next scene will feature multiple faceless people surrounding us. Some laughing, some looking confused, and it ends with a flash of Rakan's face. Back in the hospital, it's now populated by the faceless. We'll need to get to that elevator, but they're blocking it. We're gonna have to crouch and weave our way through them, or they will cause a game over state. As soon as we grab the key and weave our way back through the crowd, they'll begin to chase us. Heading for and entering the stairwell ends the chase. In this new section of the hospital, we're gonna have to find a basement key. Along the way, there is a missable recording we can find regarding Rakan.
Follow-up of patient number 9 on request from Smith Walter. Patient name, Rakan Al-Mutala. Gender, male, age 28. After Rakan's first evaluation, it is safe to say that he'll be staying here for a while. I was able to get him to talk about his paranoia. The patient believes that the whole scenario has been organized by some evil corporation in order to brainwash him into subjugation. He believes his mental capacity and awareness prevented them from getting to him. Adding to the severity of his case, he is sometimes afflicted with hallucinations. He has described these hallucinations to me as an eyeless humanoid that keeps on watching him wherever he is. Due to his psychotic behavior and his difficulty differentiating reality from paranoiac fabrication, he has been transferred to the psychiatric wing. He also displays violent behavior towards the staff, is considered to be dangerous, should be sedated and under constant surveillance in the psychiatric ward.
The way they make it sound, it seems like Rakan is an extremely paranoid man. And he probably is. But that doesn't mean he wasn't right about some things. Moving along, we'll find the basement staircase key in the admissions office. Just as we exit, we're gonna have to start running as Rakan is chasing us again. Looping around him, we'll head straight to the basement staircase and use the key to get through. Now, guess what? We gotta find another key, this time to the control room. Once we find it, we'll turn the power off to the washing machine and we can retrieve the janitor's key card, which we can use on the elevator. However, before we can do that, we're gonna have to pull all those bodies out as it's over the weight limit. Rakan's gonna make an appearance and chase us for a little while, but we're gonna have plenty of time to remove the rest of the bodies after losing him. In the next area, we'll have to find the correct room, all the while avoiding the faceless roaming around. This can either be really easy or really hard, and it just depends on if you know where you're going. Looking back and forth between the TV and the mirror, we'll see the TV image turn into an eye. When looking back at it, we'll see eyes drawn all over the room. Then, Rakan struggling and screaming on the bed while faceless stand around and laugh at him. Back in the house, we'll have to do what we previously did. Find the pictures, poke the eyes. Rakan chases us. When we get them all, we'll find the next wheelchair in the son's bedroom. This transition scene, like all the previous, seems to be from Rakan's point of view. He's sitting in a chair, surrounded by bright lights and faceless. I'm pretty sure this is him going through some type of procedure, and the faceless are doctors. Once again, we're in the hospital. We'll notice the stain on the bed has gotten even larger. Most areas will be locked off, so there's only one path to follow. The tar man will make an appearance, pointing us in the direction we need to go. In the psychiatric ward, we'll see a scene of Rakan freaking out again and attacking staff in one of the rooms.
Supposed to be here! You're all
Someone bring him up! Get his doctor right away!
Let me out of here!
We'll have to unlock it via a cell panel we find, and then we're going to be able to get the observation room key. In here, we'll see a cutscene describing all the things Rakan's done while in the hospital.
You have assaulted multiple employees and threatened security guards with a knife. You sabotaged the electric panel, leaving the entire ward under lockdown. Such behavior is leaving us questioning your mental stability and health. We are left with no choice but to isolate you from the patients and employees in the psychiatric ward. Treatments are a measure... No treatments! You all are the reason why this...
Rakan is said to be isolated due to his violent and destructive nature. He sits through it all until the doctor mentions treatments. Then he reacts strongly and believes the doctors are the reason why this is happening. Free to roam, we can now follow black footprints to a bathroom, where Dwayne will submerge his arm shoulder deep in the shitter,
disgusting,
in order to retrieve the electrical box handle. Continuing to follow the footprints into another room, when we move to exit, we'll be ambushed by the tar man injecting us with something. After we come to, we'll be able to find a breach in the wall and shimmy through, which will lead us to a pathway lined with multiple faceless behind a chain link fence. At the end of this path is a TV. Unfortunately, there are no Saturday morning cartoons on. Once reaching it, we'll be in another room full of TVs with eyes, and one giant eye, and Rakan. And our goal is to find a knife to stab the big eye with while avoiding Rakan while he chases us. The eye explodes and we proceed through the ocular tunnel. Now we can finally use that shitty handle we found on the toilet to restore the power to the elevator. In this new part of the hospital, we'll head left to find a door slightly ajar. Inside is another scene with Rakan in a wheelchair.
Rakan, right? I'm here with good news. Based on your behavior and recovery in the past few months, you'll be ready to leave and go home. Sounds good, right? There are just a few technicalities that need to be taken care of, but this will just take a couple days. With everything that happened, I'm sure you'll be very happy to leave this place. Well, I'll get back to you soon.
Inside this room, we can shove a cabinet out of the way before we climb down the hole. This takes us to some kind of observation room, where we'll watch as Rakan rants about taking them down.
I knew it! Oh, they're in big trouble now! With everything I know, I'll definitely take them down!
During his jubilation, a man in a dark suit appears in the doorway and locks Rakan in, leaving him to presumably die in the dark. And that's the end of Rakan's chapter. Silence. I have no doubt that Rakan did suffer from paranoia and scopophobia, and he may have imagined some things, but I don't think he was completely wrong, especially after seeing the last scene with him being locked in the room. I didn't mention it earlier, but I believe he was also going through electroshock therapy. The scenes with the bright lights, the power flickering, and when in the psychiatric ward, the scream and surge of electricity seemed to point to this. Towards the end, we see he's much more subdued than before. Of course, that doesn't last once he's out and back home, but as we saw, that didn't last for long, and neither did Rakan. What we want to keep in mind from this chapter is the feeling of being watched, Rakan's accusations of a conspiracy, and the entire final scene. Dwayne's chapter consists of the VHS tapes, which can be done in any order. However, you will have to finish all the previous chapters in order to get all the tapes. They tell Dwayne's story much through metaphor and symbolism, so let's try to figure out just who Dwayne is, and from there, come to the theory about the story overall. Taking clues from the tape, we head upstairs to the master bedroom. You'll see a hole in the floor has replaced the bed in the room. Climbing down, we'll find another bed, and pulling back the covers, we discover a pile of beer cans underneath. A lit up area will appear, with 2 chairs and a TV occupying one with some jaunty music coming from the radio. A Birdman appears on the TV and begins talking to Dwayne.
I've been waiting for you for quite some time now.
The Plague Doctor mask talking to him seems to be a manifestation of a part of Dwayne, the addiction. It cajoles him rather insidiously to keep drinking in order to get things back to normal and dull his senses.
See? Ain't that sweet? You know you can always rely on this to get you back on track, don't you? Yeah. You remember the coarse taste that burns and slides down your throat, ominously bringing relief in the dulling of your senses? Come on.
The presence of empty beer cans littering the house, along with wine and whiskey bottles hidden around, and the empty pill packs backs up this notion of Dwayne's addictions mentioned here. Curiously enough, it also seems to be trying to get Dwayne to remember who he is.
Who am I? You've always been like this, haven't you? Always asking the wrong questions. The real question isn't who am I, but who are you?
It alludes to Dwayne either not remembering or hiding from certain truths he doesn't want to face about himself.
In fact, one might say that this is the first time you're facing reality.
For this one, we'll be climbing through an air duct in the boiler room. You'll emerge in a stately looking room which coincidentally has many empty bottles of wine, a crow, and a contract. Once you sign the contract, the wall behind you will slide open as the clock chimes. Inside are faceless standing in a disarrayed circle. Making your way through them, you'll find a dead dove with a mask piece. Then you will proceed to be strangled by the faceless until the screen goes black. The thing that stands out the most in this chapter is the special contract and the wording on it. We don't know what the contract was, but it must have played an integral role in Dwayne's life. Other things to note are the crow front and center of the contract, and the dove. Doves symbolize many things, especially in Christianity. It can mean peace, new beginnings, or the Holy Spirit. Dead birds also have a lot of symbolism, ranging from surrendering to God or letting go of your hindrance that prevents spiritual renewal. Be cautious of indulging in fleshy desires, and God has not forgotten you. Dead doves also represent a loss of innocence. The VHS tape negligence is gotten after you finish the Dolores chapter. Watching it shows the view of the basement play area. Heading down there, we'll see a record on the wall. Placing it on the record player and using the crank will open up the wall to a supermarket. In this one, Dwayne pushes a cart down an aisle that quickly turns into nothing but beer on the shelves. The announcer of the PA has a dead on the inside voice and goes on about how there's only one special today.
One thing with a discount. Beers.
You can practically hear the alcoholism talking here as he stacks up case upon case.
6 pack. Maybe 2. One for the evening. One for later tonight.
Until eventually the aisle ends. At the end, we'll be in the TV room. Sitting down, you see that home movies of Dwayne's wife and children are playing, along with their giant wedding photo sitting above the TV prominently. As you drink beer, your wife and daughter speak to you.
Daddy? I want a story.
I think it would be great if you told her a bedtime story, Dwayne. It's been a while.
As they do, and Dwayne continues to ignore them, black ooze leaks down the walls. According to the wife in this one, Dwayne has shut himself off from everything.
Always ignoring us, glued to your fucking beers. You don't talk, you don't sleep in the bedroom, you don't get out at all, you just don't care, do you?
She asks, why is he like that? That he used to be good to them.
Why aren't you like that, Dwayne? Talk to me. You used to be so good to us.
This one shows further evidence of Dwayne's alcoholism and how it affected his life and relationship with his family. Also, that he wasn't always like this. Something happened to send Dwayne into the spiral. Located in the basement, you'll find a sledgehammer, which you'll use to break down walls. All the while, you're going to want to keep a few light bulbs between you and the darkness to keep the tar man at bay. Behind one wall, you'll find a radio repeating various words.
Torture. Cheerful.
In another, you'll see the faceless in suits standing behind a window, or what looks like a two-way mirror. Another seems to open up to the son's room. And the last has a bed covered in dark vines, or roots, like those we saw in Rakan's chapter. Pulling the mask from the wall breaks it and gives us our exit. This segment seems to harken back to Rakan's chapter with the two-way mirror and radio insinuating being watched and being manipulated via subliminal messaging. For now, watching the VHS shows us we'll be accessing the trapdoor in the basement. Once you leave the TV room, a glass on the table will appear with the Omega key. Take this key to the small upstairs area and push aside the red toolbox. Inside this small area is an Omega chest. The key will open it to reveal a handle we need to open the trapdoor. After opening the trapdoor, we descend into what looks like some kind of lab or office. There are chemistry-related things scattered about, like the periodic table and a chemical formula for LSD on the wall. Also, a staff list, with Dwayne's name on it. It lists him as working, and working a lot. He's finished whatever he's supposed to do. His start date was April 3rd, 1952, and there is no end date, estimated or otherwise. There's also a banner that says, "Changing the World Today." We don't get a lot of time to rifle around, however, as our clumsy ass broke the pipe on the way down, and the area is filling up with some kind of gas. Using the chair to break the window, then securing the fire axe on the other side, we now have a way to break the wall under the periodic table. Using a lighter to light the way, Dwayne crawls through the tunnel and returns back to the garage in the house. Following black footprints leads us back to the trapdoor, which now has the mask piece laying inside. This one is found after Lucy's chapter. Starting with the key in the box and the handle, all holding the Omega symbol, the most obvious meaning of this symbol is the end, because it's the last letter in the Greek alphabet. We could interpret it as referring to Dwayne's chapter being the last chapter of the game. After a little research, and bear with me, this is kind of a weak link, I found the symbol is also used in chemistry for the stable isotope oxygen-18. To summarize something I really know nothing about, it's used to determine the effectiveness of pharmaceuticals in the treatment of brain diseases. In its water or gaseous form, serves as a source for isotope fluorine-18. Fluorine-18 allows tracking processes that evaluate the impact of drugs on neuroreceptors. This is used to study life processes of the brain according to the analysis of metabolic products of biogenic acids in the blood, urine, and cerebrospinal fluid of patients with schizophrenia, manic depression, Parkinson's disease, and more. We've seen a lot of mentions of schizophrenia and other mental disorders, so this stuck out to me. It's probably nothing, but I wanted to include it because it's interesting nonetheless. What's more interesting is the fact that we find Dwayne's name on the staff list in a chemistry lab. So now we know Dwayne worked at least as a chemist. We also find the chemical formula for LSD, meaning the people here were probably working on it or working with it in some capacity. There's also one more name on this list that's worth noting: Andrew Smith. If you examine the stress pill bottle we use in game, you'll see he is the pharmacist labeled on the bottle, which means not only did he fill Dwayne's prescription, but that for him to be a pharmacist, Dwayne is probably also a pharmacist, since it seems they work together. Also note the name on the bottle, Health Pharmacy. That's probably the name of the business they work for. The question is, why would pharmacists be working with LSD? This one has us prying boards from the floor in that room and crouching through a tunnel. It'll lead us into the water treatment plant. Here, if you head to the right, you'll find a locker room with one locker we can interact with that has black tar underneath it. We need a key to unlock it. So heading to the other side, we'll find a cafeteria. The key is found on a tray and is labeled Lewis Taylor. Trying to exit the cafeteria sees the tar man appear. He'll chase you, so you're gonna need to run to the opposite side of the room, climb up the table, and use that crowbar to pop the vent open and climb through. He'll give up chasing you, so now you can go back to the locker room and open the locker. You'll get his key card. This key card will open the locked door, which opens to a room filled with black water, with a well in the middle and pipes leading to it, as well as another tree. After approaching the well, we'll see a shiny red apple standing out against the dark colors. When we pick it, it soon begins to rot and falls into the well. Then bodies begin to surface in the water, and the tar man grabs Dwayne and pulls him down the well. This section, combined with everything else I've shown so far, is what has led me to my current theories. But we still got one more to look at, so for the moment, I'll keep it brief. I believe the tar man is Lewis Taylor. Aside from the similar facial structure, the tar man is listed as the tallest character in game. And according to his keycard, Lewis is 6'1". That's a pretty tall dude. Also, Lewis worked at the water treatment plant. If you've had a scene up close to the tar guy, you can hear him gurgle as if he has water in his throat or lungs. I believe that's how he died, that he was drowned. We'll consider this more in a moment, but for now, let's look at the last tape. The VHS Indifference has us hunting for paintings around the house. The paintings look like various angles of a door. Once all the paintings are placed on the wall, it opens like a door into a tunnel made of beer cans. It will lead to a room with a chained up door and a table with different colored pills. Taking each pill will unlock a chain. However, once you try to open the door, the chains will reattach. Now you'll have multiple doors in the room, which, like the pills, opening a door will unlock a chain. When trying to open one, a bunch of pills will spill out. Another will simply reveal a brick wall. Then on the opposite side, this one reveals a faceless painting, and the last one has a table with a glass filled with a dark substance. I think there may be some meaning to all this, but we'll get into that at the end of this sequence. From this room, we'll now continue into a paper tunnel. There are various words written on them, such as guilt, depression, grief, anxiety, hatred, agony, suffering, indifference, sorry, and soulless. Moving ever forward, we'll now find ourselves in an underworld-like area. It has a dark and depressing feel to it, with barren black trees, chains, and stone faces with open, screaming mouths carved from the rocky walls. Further along, we'll come across a boat that will allow us to cross the dark, murky water. While crossing, we'll see a faceless watching TV with a beer in hand, and another is shooting himself over and over on a loop. Once we've come to the other side, we can now make our way to the tower. Inside, we'll see a familiar face on the TV. It'll wax on about how Dwayne built this place, and we'll talk more about this segment later in the video. But for now, we ascend the winding staircase. At the top, we'll find a photo of Dwayne and Claire's wedding. It's a bit of a somber moment, but it won't last long, as once the candle is blown out, a pill bottle will roll out from the darkness, coming to rest at a foot. This is one of my favorite scenes in the game. It really goes hard, and it further shows us reality versus what Dwayne's subconscious or this purgatory world is trying to tell him.
And go to hell where you belong!
There's a lot referenced in this section, and adds the last touches on what I think happened in the story overall. First, we have another reference to Dwayne's alcohol abuse with the tunnel made of beer cans. That leads to the pills on the table, which could be referencing his abuse of prescription medications. Each of the doors could be a metaphor on its own. The pill door is pretty obvious by now. The brick wall could mean Dwayne is or feels trapped in the house, in purgatory, or in a cycle. The one with the painting is much more difficult for me to interpret. It has a faceless and a painting with blood on it. If anyone has any ideas what this can mean, I am all ears. Then the last one with the glass with black liquid. We've seen this black liquid a few times by now, and there's definitely something to it. But for now, I'm gonna say tainted water. Next, I think the paper tunnel is referencing Dwayne's state of mind. These are all things he feels, experiences, or thinks of himself deep down. In the underworld area, we saw the faceless watching TV and drinking, and we saw one shooting himself over and over on a loop. I think this is Dwayne. We've had instances of him sitting, watching TV and drinking while ignoring his family, and the beginning cutscene of the game has him shooting himself. I also believe there's a reason why it continues to loop. If you're going for the bad ending, you have to shoot yourself 7 times, performing the action over and over. It could also reference that Dwayne has been stuck in this loop for a long time, constantly going through these horrors while not wanting to face what he's done out of sheer guilt. Skipping ahead because I have an off-the-wall theory pertaining to the plague doctor guy, which I will include later on. The pill bottle that rolls out and stops at Dwayne's wife's feet. If you take a look at it, it's labeled loracidone. This is not the same medication we take in game, that would be chlorpromazine. But it is prescribed for similar reasons. Stress, at least in Dwayne's case. It's also used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar depression, and it can be used for anxiety. So, yes, I can see this being prescribed for stress, I suppose. It was also prescribed by the same doctor, and filled by Andrew Smith. I also want to note both bottles have the same prescription number. I'm not sure why they would change the name of the drug for this scene, and again, if you have any ideas, I definitely want to hear them. Moving on from that, Dwayne's wife starts off with a caring tone. She's concerned for him and wants to help him.
I love you, Dwayne. I want to help you.
It's only when she and the children are wearing the familiar plague doctor mask do their words turn brutal. In my opinion, I think this is Dwayne's thoughts alone, not his wife's or his children's. But let's take a second look at what they said. Fake wife mentions blood money.
It's probably blood money, but I don't care.
Meaning he's earning his living through unsavory and harmful means, making money at the cost of others' lives. And last but not least, fake family also mentions how everyone died in the house.
Do you want a rope? Want me to stab you with 7 knives? Want me to rip the jaw off your ugly face? How about I break both your legs and leave you to rot in a cellar? Kill yourself by yourself alone. And go to hell where you belong!
The rest of the video, I will be explaining a couple theories for this game. Starting with, Dwayne Anderson was a man in his early to mid-50s by the year 1985, which is when he ended his own life. I came to this conclusion because looking at the employee list in the chem lab during the Pride section, we can see he began work in the year 1952. Assuming he had to have been around at least 20 years old, give or take a few years, to have a job as a chemist working in a pharmacy, and then adding the 33 years between then and 1985, I believe that would make him at least 51 years old at the youngest guess. He worked at a pharmacy called Health Pharmacy as a pharmacist/chemist. He had a wife named Claire, a son named Michael, and a daughter named Sarah. He and his family moved into the house sometime between the years 1972 and 1983. I picked 72 as Rakan lived in the house in 1970. We don't know the year he died, and we don't know how long he spent in the hospital, only that it was a while. So I just picked the earliest, most feasible date, and I know they lived in the house by at least 1983 due to Sarah's height chart on the wall in the kitchen. Dwayne wasn't always a troubled man. He was a caring father and a loving husband for some time before his decline. We find many photos of him and his family looking happy together, and in the negligence section, Claire mentions that Dwayne used to be good to them. Dwayne either participated or was associated with Project MK Ultra, or its in-universe equivalent. This is not a new theory. I've seen quite a few people mention it, and I'm of the same mind. Let's start with a little history of the project itself. Project Artichoke, which was initially known as Project Bluebird, officially arose in 1951 and was succeeded by Project MK Ultra in 1953 and ran until 1973. MK Ultra was a top-secret CIA project in which the agency conducted hundreds of clandestine experiments, sometimes on unwitting U.S. citizens, to assess the potential use of LSD and other drugs for mind control, information gathering, and psychological torture. MK Ultra's scope was broad, with activities carried out under the guise of research at more than 80 institutions aside from the military, including colleges and universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. The CIA operated using front organizations, although some top officials at these institutions were aware of the CIA involvement. As mentioned before, Dwayne worked at a pharmacy as a chemist/pharmacist. They were working on an ongoing project that started in the year 1952, and LSD was involved. I believe the special contract he signed during the greed segment was probably a governmental contract, and the "I don't give a f" was him throwing away his morals for the greed, for the money. Not to mention the bit where his fake wife mentions it's probably blood money. This brings us to the next part.
Smile. Money. Kite.
Again, nothing new, but here's why I believe that. Lucy, Dolores, and Rakan all suffered or were predisposed to some type of mental illness. 2 is an odd coincidence. 3 is suspicious, and they all lived in the house one after the other, with no other people in between from the years of 1961 to 1970, all except for Lewis Taylor, which was smack dab in the time frame for MK Ultra. MK Ultra often preyed on the most vulnerable members of society, like the mentally impaired. Lucy, Dolores, and Rakan all had some issues with the radios and their TVs. Lucy could hear something talking to her through the TV and the radio. Dolores could hear the baby and herself through the baby monitor, which is a type of radio. Rakan noticed something was off with his radio. In the prison VHS sequence, we find a radio hidden in a wall repeating various words, much like subliminal messaging. In Lucy and Dolores' case, it's possible that due to their previous mental condition, that their minds interpreted the words to be talking to them. As for Rakan, he already suffered from paranoia and scopophobia, thus, his reaction was a little different, and he assumed the radio had been tampered with. If you think that's an absurd idea, let me bring you to the attention of Operation Midnight Climax. Operation Midnight Climax was an MK Ultra project in which the government lured unsuspecting men to CIA safe houses where drug experiments took place. The CIA dosed the men with the LSD and then watched the drug's effects on the men's behavior. Recording devices were installed in rooms disguised as electrical outlets. During the events of this game, I do believe that the CIA, or its in-game equivalent, were observing the residents of the house, while manipulating the most vulnerable of the occupants with subliminal messaging and LSD. Now we know that LSD has a wide range of effects on people, and it affects people differently. It can cause disturbing hallucinations, panic, paranoia, increased risk-taking, and psychosis in larger quantities. It's possible Dwayne was the pharmacist for the 3, and that he either switched out their medication or laced it with LSD per his association with the project. Why do I think this? Well, to be honest, I'm not set in stone on it. The only threads linking this idea are because both Dolores and Rakan know his name, and they are not faceless to him. The first point is pretty flimsy. It could be just him projecting this, that they may not have actually known his name when they were alive. But the second point holds a little more weight, which brings me to Lewis Taylor lived alone in a house during the year 1965. He worked at the water treatment plant. This is the only solid evidence we have of this guy. However, as I said, I do believe he and the tar man are one and the same due to their physical appearance, height, and the correlation that I believe the tar man died by drowning, and Lewis worked at the water treatment plant. I also believe he was involved with the project. He is the only one that lived in the house that we have no information on. We don't know if he had any mental illnesses. We don't know if he died in the house or not. We don't know anything about his life other than that he was single, he lived in the house, and he worked at this plant. So, all this is pretty much speculation with no real evidence to back it up. But I do believe he was contracted to spike the town's drinking water with LSD. And I believe Dwayne was his point of contact to receive said drug. During this segment, when we're in the well area, we pluck an apple from the tree, and it quickly rots and falls into the well. Afterwards, dozens of faceless bodies surface in the water and the tar man pulls Dwayne down the well. Considering those religious tones, there could be a really deep metaphor here about God, the tree of knowledge, and choosing to know evil. But for this case, let's focus on the metaphor related to this theory. The rotten apple is the LSD. It falling into the well symbolizes the town's water being spiked with the LSD. The bodies surfacing are representing the citizens in the town affected by it. Not necessarily dying, but just being affected by it. And they are faceless because Dwayne didn't personally see them, didn't personally affect them. The tar man being in the well, I believe, means Lewis was drowned in this facility. But why and by who? I personally couldn't find any links on why he was drowned or who he was drowned by. So this one's still a mystery. One more note on the water being spiked. If you collect the comic book pages in the house, we can get a little backstory on Dwayne's neighbor Rose. In 1961, the first page shows the aftermath of the Lucy chapter. Frank mentions how Lucy used to talk to herself, but otherwise doesn't seem to care about anything outside of his TV. Rose is greeted at the door by an officer and a man in a suit. They mention the case is confidential, very confidential, as the man in the suit says with an odd smile. 1962, this seems to be when Dolores, George, and their baby move in. We see more Frank being an asshole. 1965, this is when Lewis moved in, a single man with no kids, and he seemed unhappy according to Rose. 1970, this is Rakan's time in the house. Frank yet again accuses Rose of wanting another man, yet this time, Rose ain't taking it. 1985, the house is in disarray. This bit shows the first phone call from Rose that Dwayne receives. It also shows Rose drinking bloody bath water, where her now deceased husband lies. In every panel, we see Rose drinking water. And it isn't until 1970 when it seems her attitude or personality changed. At first, we could believe it's because she had enough of her husband's shit. But I think this is alluding to the water being spiked and Rose being affected by said water. Also, after finishing the comic, you'll get an interesting and ominous phone call from Rose.
She'll take your body, and then she'll take your mind.
I think Dwayne was also dosed with LSD. Hear me out. If I'm gonna go with the theory that the house was or is a control house for the CIA or its equivalent, then Dwayne is not here by coincidence. I also don't think Dwayne knew about its true purpose. I just can't see him knowingly moving his family into this house of horrors. We know Dwayne is a Catholic, and it's possible as time went on that the guilt began to build. It could be that Dwayne, in his guilt, was becoming mentally unstable, perhaps depressed, and obviously under a great amount of stress, which led to the drinking and the prescription pills. And in this state, the powers that be decided he was a loose end and needed to be dealt with. What better way to deal with that than to make him do it himself, in a place they could keep an eye on him? Do I have any hard evidence of this? The only true evidence I have of this is again Andrew Smith, the one he worked with, and the pharmacist listed on his medication bottles. It could be that this Andrew tampered with his medication the same way Dwayne tampered with the other's medication. And after a period of being dosed with LSD, mixed with the stress, depression, alcoholism, and abuse of prescription pills, he finally cracked and ended his and his family's lives. I'm not saying this is exactly what happened, but I am saying that I think it is at least a possibility. Dwayne Anderson had a wife and 2 children, was a chemist, worked at a pharmacy, and had dealings with a clandestine project that tried to brainwash people. He had a direct hand in the suffering of the residents of this house due to his affiliation with said project. After a crisis of conscience and faith, he began to drink heavily, abuse medication, and neglect his family. In a sad twist of fate, the very drug he helped propagate was used on him and, in the end, played a role in his self-destruction. His soul experienced a purgatory of his own making and was made to experience all the pain and sadness he helped create in order to purge him of his sins so he could finally move on. Here's an extra theory I wanted to mention because I can. This pertains to the underworld area from the Indifference tape, the appearance of the Plague Doctor face, the Crow, and the contract. The Plague Doctor guy could be a representation of the demon Malphas. Yes, 2 videos in a row mentioning this guy? I swear I didn't plan it, but hear me out. Let me give some info on Malphas first, which I got from... what is that book called? Which I got from the book Names of the Damned, the Dictionary of Demons, which I bought years ago on a whim because I like weird books. Seriously, there's nothing more to it than that. Anyway, Malphas is said to be connected to the builder's craft. He is said to erect houses and high towers upon command. When he manifests, he first takes the form of a crow. When he puts on a human shape, he nevertheless retains the rasping voice of this bird. He is further said to willingly accept sacrifices, but to deceive all those who make sacrifices unto him. According to the Goetia of Dr. Rudd, he is said to have the power to destroy an enemy's thoughts, desires, and works. The high towers and houses mentioned in this passage could equate to the tower in the Indifference area and the house Dwayne is stuck in, or rather his purgatory. He first takes the form of a crow. Well, that one's pretty easy. There's a crow perched on a chair overlooking the contract from the Greed segment. His human shape isn't particularly human, but I think we can consider this the appearance of the Plague Doctor mask. And his voice, I wouldn't say is very crow-like, but it certainly has a flair to it. He accepts sacrifices, but deceives those who make sacrifices for him. This could be Dwayne signing the contract, sacrificing his morals for money, only to be deceived by what the project actually was, or having it turned around on himself. Destroying thoughts, desires, and works. This could mean the destruction of the minds of the subjects by the project itself, at least the ones in the house. In any case, this was just an extra thing that doesn't really add much, but I wanted to include it because it's weird and can kind of make sense depending on how you interpret it. We could also see this guy as being part of Dwayne, the worst part of him. The part that makes him drink, that makes him numb himself, that makes him ignore his family. The parts he needs to remember, the part he needs to stop hiding from. So, you know, pick your interpretation. This game has tons of room for it. We see some mentions of a John or Johnny in a few places. In Sarah's room, there's a drawing of her and John. The black and white picture of a baby in a crib with John 1972 written on the back. There's also a picture labeled John and Dad 1976. The affliction tape is labeled John walking with Mom. So I'm thinking John is Dolores and George's baby. Going back to the VHS, it features a baby and a woman wearing a nightgown with white slippers and a crib in the background. Dolores and George had a son. We know it's a boy due to George referencing the baby with him. Cribs feature prominently in Dolores' chapter. Dolores is always seen in a nightgown and slippers. We find and interact with a pair of white slippers in the bedroom in her chapter. Then we have the Polaroid of a baby in a crib, and on the back it's labeled John 1976, only the text is mirrored, and we know that mirrors feature heavily in Dolores' chapter. However, there are some hiccups with this idea. Dolores and George lived in a house between 1962 and 1965, and we know for certain that they were deceased by the end of her chapter. As for the fate of the baby, even if he had survived, he wouldn't still be a baby or a toddler by 1972. That's in the least a 7-year gap. And then the picture of John and Dad, 1976. The man in this photo looks like the man in the other photos, which is supposed to be Dwayne. But we know that Dwayne only had 2 children, his son Michael and his daughter Sarah. I don't think Dwayne had a 3rd child that passed away either, because we see nothing at all in the game about that. Not a hint, not a throwaway line, nothing. And I feel like that if it were the case, we definitely would have seen that featured somewhere, somehow, due to the nature of this game and what it's about. The only 2 possibilities I can come up with is either memories are getting mixed up in the house, mixing baby John in with the Anderson family, or it might have been a mistake that got left in. But I'm gonna go with the former because that one picture of baby John with the text mirrored is what's really selling it for me. Yes, it's just one piece of evidence, but almost everything else that has him in it has a crib in the background somewhere. In either case, I'm sticking with my final verdict that John was Dolores and George's baby. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my theory dumps. I hope some of these were new and interesting for you, and I hope I made it coherent enough. It took a bit to try and organize all this information and my thoughts to get into a script form that made any kind of sense. My first go around with this game, I played in tandem with a friend, and I was still tense through a lot of these sections, especially Lucy's. I do believe he's also going to be making a video on this game, so I will link that in the description when he gets that out. Thank you so much for your time. Like if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, comments and subs are always welcome, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you again for watching The Midnight Goat.